Welcome to Automation Hunter, the podcast for entrepreneurs and businesses ready to scale smarter. In this series, Apps, Hacks, and Bounties, your host, Will Christensen, dives into game-changing tools and strategies alongside special guests, sharing insights to boost productivity and solve real business challenges. Ready to innovate? Let's dive in.
Welcome to this episode of Automation Hunter. This is Apps, Hacks, and Bounties, as you probably know from the title. We're going to dive right in here. Sreenath, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. The first question I always like to ask is, why would someone be interested in hearing from you in terms of AI, technology, apps, hacks, bounties? What are you doing that may be a little different than others that are out there today?
Yeah, great question. I think where I sit, I'm the founder and CEO of Intentwise, which, if you have not heard, is a SaaS business providing advertising optimization and analytics services in what we call the retail media space, Amazon ads, Walmart ads, so on and so forth. So I sit in the luxurious position of running a company that predates the AI wave. So I have to sit and think hard about what that means as the go forward direction for A, certainly as a business, and B, individually. I personally produce a lot of content. So I've been playing a lot with a whole bunch of tools, trying to call it more efficiency out of that process. So I guess the short story, Will, here is I have battle scars from trying to leverage AI for personal use to building apps to running a business around it and all of that. So hopefully I'll give you something useful here.
I love it. I'm excited to dig in here with you, and I do agree. It is a constant deluge, and a lot of people that I talk to are like, "Man, I feel like I'm being left behind." There's so many new tools coming out so rapidly.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting when we all get our own personal AI to evaluate AI tools. I think we're getting closer and closer. I mean, ChatGPT is doing a decent job of helping us evaluate some of the new stuff that's out there, but that's a whole nother business idea right there. Creating something that, like, would I pay $50 a month to be in the know about every single new tool that came out? I probably would. If I really trusted the resource. That seems like a no-brainer, which is kind of interesting. Love it. Well, let's dive into the first section here, apps. What app have you come across recently that you were like, wow, yeah, that totally makes sense?
Yeah. I think there's a category of apps, right, which is like platforms that are allowing you to build apps very quickly. And so very specifically, a big fan of Lovable, and Bolt are a couple of things I've tried. And there's a couple of ways I've used them, right? One is in terms of our own internal process of building software. Envisioning an idea would take some time, whether use Figma or whatever, did some wireframes and all of that. And all that took some time. But with Lovable, like, I could just prompt my way to a reasonable looking prototype. It just saves you so much time, so much back and forth. Also, the other use I put Lovable to is, as a business, you always have spreadsheets of all kinds of stuff, sales stuff, company stuff.
Spreadsheets are the most common database, unfortunately.
Exactly.
In organizations, or fortunately, depending on which way you want to look at it.
Yeah. So what Lovable has allowed me to do is build pretty complex visualizations on top of it that make those the data inside those spreadsheets really pop. So it's almost like building an app on top of that spreadsheet, but for your personal use. So those are kind of the two things I've done. And then in terms of a process itself internally, our entire team now uses Lovable and Bolt to accelerate prototyping. So,
love it. I think prototyping is one of those key things that entrepreneurs have to do to test their concepts and figure out what's out there. I actually was at a family camp with my sister this 2-3 weekends ago, and she has this budgeting app. She's like, I built it in a spreadsheet. I reverse engineered it for myself. I'm neurodivergent. Like, the natural tendency for that, like, I can't use the normal stuff that I've seen out there. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I built something new. And she said, and I've spent the last 2 or 3 weeks going back and forth with Claude, and I now have like different conversations with Claude where I have it's built out like the name and the, just different parts of the app.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do next. Like I don't know what to do next. And I said, have you heard of Rourke? RORK? And she was like, no. And I was like, let's go install that. So we went over to her Claude and we said, write me an executive summary for another AI to rebuild this application. And we did it for each of its sections. And then we had it combine them all together with an executive spec document. Then we fed that into Rourke. And she said, $20 later and an hour or two of going back and forth with it, and I have a semi-functional prototype. I mean, exactly what you just said. I said, okay, now this is where it gets interesting, because you can start to do some crowdsourcing or some vetting to see whether or not there actually is a market out there for the thing you want to build. So you can take screenshots and videos of yourself on your phone messing around with this app that you've built, and all of a sudden you're out into the races. And she was like, holy crap, $20, and a couple of hours later, I have a semi-functional app.
Yeah, so here's my contrarian view on this, right? Which is basically one way to look at this is the marginal cost of building a new application is zero, which means that everyone will build. So in my view, if you want to build a real business around this app, it's not the software anymore, it's distribution, right? That's where the game is. So, Sam Altman's statement from yesterday, I think, right? Welcome to the fast fashion of SaaS. So there'll be everyone trying to build an app, right? And I'm sure it'll work for a few people. So, and then what I think happens, and this is the hard part that I don't know that AI actually solves, is how do you nail your go-to-market and distribution to actually build a real business? And then when your business scales, how does your application scale to a much higher usage?
And I think at that point, everybody's going to have this. I mean, you and I have both built SaaS companies, so we know what's underneath. Like when you get 100, 150, 500 users, 1,000 users, what starts to happen to those servers. Like they start to crumble and fall apart, and the framework and the technical debt. And I mean, it just gets out of control really fast. So it'll be very interesting to see which ones nail the go-to-market, and then which ones figure out how to put some of those different pieces in place so they can scale. 100%. I agree with you that is a world that these new SaaS founders are not prepared for.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to have. See, I heard Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, speak at CES. He shared an interesting stat. He said, the world produces as much video content now every month as it has produced in its lifetime before it. Okay, so I think the same thing will apply to software code. We will produce so much code every month.
Crap.
So we will produce so much code, there'll be lots of spaghetti code all over the place. And so as much as there is this, software coding jobs are dead, this, that, and the other, I'm sure it's true to a fair degree, but there will be a need to maintain this, because every platform is going to start spewing a bunch of code. So
yeah, none of them. I mean, think about it. They haven't been around long enough to identify the scaling problems, and so you're going to be paying $1,000 a month for this SaaS application that can't keep up with your users. It's crashing, and they don't know how to scale because they're startups themselves and having to figure out. I mean, Fathom Note Taker. We've got two of them, or one of them here in this room. Fathom is a perfect example of a company that came out with a free offering. They went head to head with Gong and several of those others who were charging through the nose for this technology. And they came in to disrupt it because they understood that it was about a distribution channel, right? Yeah. Like it's about capturing those free users and getting as many of them as possible. I was on the phone with their founder on an episode of Automation Hunter. Cool. And I asked him, like, how are you going to maintain this being free? Like the infrastructure costs. And he's like, oh no, He said, when you spend $250,000 on AI in an afternoon, because you put some few lines of code that added more AI to your app, you've hit a scale at which that's a little more than I'd like to spend on AI in a day. He was just like, the scale is astronomical. And so he's had to spend a lot of his time making sure that his company can scale with that freemium offering to grow where it goes. So I totally agree. I think that there's going to be some interesting pieces there. All right. So shifting to the next question, what is a hack that you've used as an entrepreneur, as a business professional that you'd
Yeah,
like to share?
it's a bit of a silly hack, to be honest, Will, but it's so I got hooked to this transcriber. It's called Wispr Flow, where it's now mapped to my function key on my Mac, and I just hold and speak, right? Um,
I'm totally
so
hooked on
that's
that thing too.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, over the last 3 months, I type so much less than I ever typed before, and it just feels faster. Now, you combine that with ChatGPT or any LLM for that matter. So your spelling mistakes, your grammatical mistakes are all handled by the LLM, right? So this combination of transcribing and using an LLM to kind of morph it or edit it to whatever your use is, whether it's a LinkedIn post or a RFP or whatever, that
Hmm.
certainly has sped up my process. So,
Yeah.
however, I will say it's like directions and GPS. We did just fine when we didn't have GPS, and our brains probably were more attuned to where the heck we were driving and all of that. Now, most of us will hit the GPS and have a maps going to, even if you're going to the same location that you go every day, right? So I feel like that's happening to me with writing and grammar. It's it's going to shit. So while productivity has improved, skill seems to be going the other way. So it'll be I don't know where the balance is, but that's my hack at the moment.
That is super interesting, and I totally agree with you. My favorite thing to do is to pontificate into, Wispr Flow. It corrects all the grammar, spits it out in what you said there, and then what I will do is I'll use Superhuman, which is an AI tool that sits on top of email, and I will tell it to rewrite it in my voice. And the results that I get out of that are like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, I could not have written this email as well as it's written here
yeah,
because it has all of the thought behind my verbal processing, which I'm much better at verbal processing than I am written. And then on top of that thought, it now is rewritten in my voice so that
yeah.
it's, against all of my other emails that I've sent before. I mean, unreal levels of good results. So combining an LLM with something like Wispr Flow to, produce your result is fantastic.
Yeah. So
I,
that's
I
my
actually
that's
use
that's
it.
my hack.
I love it. I use it live on like I'm teaching a class, and I will use it while I'm using an LLM. Like I'm sharing my screen using an LLM, and I will talk to the group like I'm talking to the group, but I'll hit the record button. So it's recording there, slapping it into ChatGPT while I'm talking to everybody. It's phenomenal how slick it is.
Yep, totally.
All right. So last but not least, moving on to bounties. So the question here in terms of bounties is what have you tried to automate or bring AI into that just has turned out to not be um,
Yeah.
what you thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problems I see are honestly the fundamental problems we should expect from AI, which I think at the moment there is both an overestimation and an underestimation of what AI can do. And part of what is overestimated is we overestimate its ability to be precise and accurate, and we overestimate, I believe, its reasoning capabilities. End of the day, I think it's a next best token predictor. Where it falls apart, I think, is like the other day I wanted to do some research and I asked it to go get me by quarter ad revenue of all the ad tech companies, right? It went about getting a whole bunch of numbers for Google, Meta, and everybody else. Now, I'm very close to Amazon numbers, so there's no way I could have just ballpark verified Google or Meta numbers, but I could verify Amazon numbers and realize, oh, that's wrong. It's a beautiful report, right? Uh, but the actual data is wrong. And the only reason why I picked up is because I knew the number. So I think, and then it got better when I asked the LLM to say, don't go looking for all the sources that are out there. Go look at the earnings reports only. Then it got better. So problem is that you are not fully aware with the outputs when they're not
Yep.
accurate, right?
Yep. Yeah. If you're not an expert in the outputs,
Yeah.
then verifying those outputs is quite difficult.
Yep. So my lesson from that process is like just be extremely careful on use cases where you want precision in the output from an LLM.
Yeah.
It'll fail you more often than not.
So for me, what I've done to combat that is I have um tried to give it flexibility in creating like a ranking table for the data to, hey, look at all the sources of where you got this data, score each source, based on accuracy, timeliness, all of these sorts of things to try. And then I'll say, okay, only use the ones with a score above X, Y, or Z to try to like get it to narrow its context window. That's one thing I've done. Another thing I've done to try to eliminate the hallucinations and different pieces of that is remember that this thing is basically a really smart intern.
Yeah.
So zero real world experience.
Yep.
But every imaginable thing possible out there that it's consuming. And it's consuming the entire internet. If you've watched, Star Trek and you got data from Star Trek, it's like that guy, except for that there's zero executive functioning that's like, oh, this is right and that's wrong, because there's no experience behind it.
Yeah.
And so if I think about AI in that way, this is not a bulletproof expert that I should just take, willy-nilly their advice. This is a really smart intern, and it's up to me to use my critical thinking skills to be like, is that Amazon number right? Or, and dig into those different pieces.
I will say that, we are deploying a lot of AI apps within our platform. The way we combat that is to bring a lot of that domain knowledge and force a whole bunch of guardrails and constraints and decision paths that are baked in, right? That's how we are elevating the reliability of any precision-oriented metrics that we are spitting out, right? So yeah.
Interesting. So another way to do that is to look at, okay, what is the task that I just gave AI? Let's look at that quarterly earnings report that you were talking about, or the quarterly ad spend. Looking at those different earnings reports and things that are being sent out, there's obviously lots of variability that can happen in those different sides of it. But when you say, hey, go find me this and make me a report, you're actually assuming it will do a ton of different steps in there.
Yeah.
And so if you break down those steps and choose some of the if-then statements for it, and break it apart, put it into Zapier or Make or whatever else so that you can give specific pieces of it, specific instructions, there's less assumptions that it makes, which is kind of interesting because that's kind of what you would do with a really smart intern.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you had a really smart intern who was working on these different pieces and they were producing poor results, you would get in and understand the thought process and insert things into it. I love that. Totally a fantastic example of a bounty and something that we're all facing right now in terms of making sure that the LLMs and the other tools we're using are not hallucinating as much as possible. I have not tried Lovable yet. I'm excited to go play with it a little bit more.
Sure.
The one that I've used a fair amount is Rourke, and it's good for iOS and Android applications.
Sure.
It's done a pretty good job there. And the other one I've used is Replit. Have you come across Replit yet?
Yep.
Tell me the difference between Replit and Lovable. What would you say is the difference between those two?
I think there's a lot of similarities. Actually, sorry, I don't know the technical nuance between them. I use Lovable a lot more than I've used Replit. It just feels like they're very similar tools, but I'm sure there's a lot of nuances between them that I'm not aware of.
No, that's interesting. That'll be a future episode I'll do.
That's right.
Because I've spent a fair amount of time on Replit and I know where its limits are. And there's like 4 or 5 different apps that I've tried to build and, gotten to some degree of functionality. And then it just hits that AI wall of, I can't quite figure out what you're asking. So I'll be curious to see what Lovable brings out of that. But I think it's cool. Your idea of putting spreadsheets in the background is not something I've tried with Replit. So I'll be curious to see what we can pull out. Well, appreciate your time today, Sreenath. This was a fantastic episode, and we'll end it there.
Thank you so much, Will. Take care.